All right, listeners, buckle up because today we are tackling the big one. We're diving into the wild world of building a website for your business right here in Australia. And look, I'll be honest, I've been down this road myself, trying to DIY my way to a website armed with nothing but coffee and a whole lot of optimism. Let's just say I've learned the hard way that getting that contact form to actually, work, it's a bit more complicated than those YouTube tutorials make it seem. But that's why we're here today. No more website woes. We're going deep on this really useful guide, building your own website, and figuring out what it all means for us down here in Australia. And to help us navigate the tech jargon and decode the secrets of a killer website, I've got our resident digital guru in the studio with us today.
Always happy to talk websites, especially for fellow Aussies. What I found really interesting about this guide right off the bat is how it gets the whole DIY appeal, especially for us, saving a few bucks and having total creative freedom. It's a big deal when you're starting out for sure.
Oh, totally. It's that Aussie entrepreneurial spirit shining through. We're scrappy, we're resourceful. Why not build our own websites? But as anyone who's tried it knows, that DIY path, it's not always smooth scrolling and easy checkouts. Not always.
Yeah, and that's where this guide gets real. It doesn't sugarcoat the tough stuff, like cost, for example. Those free website builders, tempting, absolutely. But they've got their limits, especially as your business grows. You might end up having to pay for upgrades to get features you really need. And suddenly that free website isn't so free anymore.
Right. The free website dream turning into a bit of a freemium nightmare. So besides those surprise costs, what else should our listeners watch out for? What are some of those hidden DIY gotchas?
Well, the big one, and most people don't realize this starting out, it's time. Building a website, it's not just making a pretty homepage, right? It's SEO, it's making content, it's security, updates, it adds up fast. You can easily find yourself working on it full time if you're not careful.
Oh, I can vouch for that. Let's just say my weekend project turned into a month-long saga. And speaking of things that can get a bit hairy, let's talk tech skills. How much coding do you really need to know these days to build your own website?
Well, the good news is that those website builders, they've definitely made things easier on the tech side. But there's still a learning curve for sure, especially if you want to go beyond the basics, Like if you want to tweak the design, you'll probably need at least a bit of HTML and CSS. And don't even get me started on JavaScript if you want to add like interactive elements. That's a whole other beast.
Yeah, JavaScript and I are not on speaking terms. Okay, so maybe I'll stick to my day job and finally learn some basic HTML on the weekends. But let's get back to something you mentioned earlier, security. Because this guide doesn't mess around, it lays out the risks really clearly, especially for businesses that handle, sensitive customer information.
Absolutely. And it's not just about like preventing hackers, right? This guide gets into Australian privacy laws, which is huge. Things like the Privacy Act of 1988. You know how you collect, store, use personal information online, all that.
Wait, hold up. Are you telling me there are specific website laws we have to follow here in Australia? Things just got real.
Oh, yeah. Big time. It's a whole legal minefield out there. The guide even mentions the Spam Act of 2003. Like, imagine you pour your heart and soul into this amazing email campaign, only to find out, oops, you've accidentally been spamming people because you missed some tiny legal detail.
Yeah, that's not a good look. Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal of a professional, someone who knows all the ins and outs of this stuff, especially here in Australia, right? And speaking of things that can make or break your website, let's talk about the SEO. Everyone says it's important. But what's the deal? How do we actually get our Aussie businesses noticed online?
And this is where I think this guide gets really smart. It goes beyond the usual SEO stuff and talks about local SEO, which is crucial for businesses in Australia. We're talking optimizing your site for searches like Best Coffee Sydney or Plumber Melbourne,
Right, because someone's searching for a plumber in Melbourne, they're probably not going to fly my mate's plumbing business in Perth. Even if his website is like the Mona Lisa of websites, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Exactly. And the guide gets into the nitty-gritty of it. Listing your business on Google My Business, using location-based keywords in your content, even getting listed in local directories. It's all about showing up where it matters, when people are actually looking for what you offer.
So it's like you have to optimize for humans and search engines. Which sounds kind of tricky, right? Like finding that balance between using the right keywords and creating content that people actually want to read.
Exactly. It's a delicate dance, for sure. But this guide, it really emphasizes the importance of quality content, and not just any content, locally relevant stuff like customer testimonials, local events related to your industry. You can even use a bit of Aussie slang or humor. Connect with people on that level.
Okay, now that's what I'm talking about. Actionable advice. It's not just about sounding smart. It's about speaking the language of your audience. Literally.
It's about being genuine, being real, mate. And that brings us back to the big question, doesn't it? DIY or bring in the experts. It's not a one-size-fits-all answer. And this guide does a great job of laying out all the things to think about. Your own skills, your time, your budget.
Totally. So for those listeners who are maybe feeling a little overwhelmed by the whole website building thing, especially with all the Aussie-specific stuff we have to consider, let's talk about that other option, calling in the professionals. After my little adventure with that contact form, let's just say I'm a huge fan of letting the experts handle things, at least sometimes. It's like, yeah, sometimes it's not about proving you can do it all yourself. Sometimes it's knowing when to call in the experts, right? But if you are going to go down that road, there are a lot of web developers out there. How do you even choose? Especially here in Australia, how do you find someone who really gets what we need?
It all comes down to research, mate. This guide, it actually has some great tips on that, like what to look for in a web developer, especially one that knows the Aussie market inside and out. Things like checking their portfolio, obviously, seeing what kind of work they've done before, testimonials from other clients, that's always a good sign, and seeing if they've worked with businesses in your industry, that can be a big plus.
It's like finding a good tradie, right? You want someone who knows what they're doing, someone you can trust to do a good job. And especially with something like building a website, which is so important for your business, you don't just want to pick someone at random from the yellow pages.
Exactly. And just like you wouldn't be afraid to ask a tradie about their experience, don't be afraid to grill your potential web developers. Ask about their process, their security protocols. How do they make sure your site's going to comply with all those Aussie regulations we talked about?
Speaking of Aussie expertise, our trusty guide does give a shout out to a company called Now Technology Systems. They apparently specialize in websites for the Australian market.
Right, and that local knowledge, that can make a real difference. It's not just about the technical stuff. It's about understanding the audience, the culture, maybe even throwing in a good day or a fair dinkum here and there. Who knows?
Okay, maybe not the slang, but you get the idea. It's about connecting with people on their level. So there you have it, folks. Whether you decide to go DIY or bring in the experts, we've covered a lot of ground today. Hopefully you're feeling more confident and prepared to tackle your own website project, whatever that might look like.
And remember, it's a journey, right? Building a website, I mean. It's not just a one-time thing. You've got to keep it updated, keep it fresh, keep it working for you.
Well said. Keep those websites humming, everyone, and we'll catch you next time for another deep dive.